Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a fresh look at Jane Eyre. It's one of those novels many of us think we know pretty well, but it turns out there are these layers of revolution and really personal stuff hidden just beneath the surface.
That's absolutely right. For this deep dive, we've pulled together insights from, well, quite a few sources that really unpack Jane Eyre's unique identity. It's not just a great story, it's this truly groundbreaking literary work. And it was so deeply shaped by Charlotte Bronte's own life and, of course, the whole social scene of Victorian England.
Okay, so our mission today is to explore how this one novel managed to blend deeply personal autobiography with really genre-defining innovation. It challenged literary norms, social norms, everything. We're going to try and uncover how Jane Eyre really broke new ground, thinking about how it portrayed childhood, the female experience, even the very form of the novel itself. So where do we start? What's the big picture here?
Well, the core idea, and it's a really interesting one, is that Jane Eyre is first and foremost a fictional autobiography. It's deeply rooted in Charlotte Bronte's own experiences, definitely. But maybe not always in the super direct, literal way you might assume. She's drawing from life, sure, but she's transforming it.
Okay, so not a straightforward memoir then. Where do we first see these kind of real-life echoes popping up in Jane's story?
Right, from Jane's early school days, really. We see these pretty harrowing details that directly mirror Bronte's own childhood. Our sources highlight Charlotte, she was 8, and her sister Emily, just 6, joining their older sisters Maria and Elizabeth at Cowan Bridge boarding school. And it sounds awful. A punishing regime, they call it. Cold, hunger, poor health, which tragically led to Maria and Elizabeth dying from tuberculosis. It's a truly bleak picture.
Wow. And it sounds like this wasn't just a general vibe influencing the book, but specific characters were drawn directly from this pain.
Precisely. Elizabeth Gaskell, Charlotte Bronte's friend and biographer, she's stated quite plainly that Helen Burns in Jane Eyre is, quote, an exact transcript of Maria Brontë. Gaskell even noted that Charlotte's heart, right up until she died, still beat with this unavailing indignation over how cruelly her gentle sister was treated. That's such a powerful link, isn't it? Between the author's own deep suffering and the novel's core emotional truth.
Yeah, specific people inspiring specific characters. Okay, that brings us to maybe the most complex figure in the novel, Rochester. Our sources claim he's this amalgam, like a blend of two very distinct, maybe even extreme personalities Charlotte knew really well from her childhood. How does that even work? Doesn't it risk making him feel a bit inconsistent?
That's a great question. And that's sort of where Bronte's genius comes in, I think. The sources point to two men. First, her father, Patrick. He was learned, intelligent, eccentric, quite dominant, but also apparently loving and compassionate. And the other, her brother, Branwell. Gifted, ambitious, yeah, but also self-absorbed with serious issues. Drink, depression, general dissolution. Apparently, Brontë shared this real intellectual and emotional openness with these men. It was a bond her heroines, and maybe Brontë herself, valued more than conventional love.
Okay, so the genius isn't just copying people she knew. It's creating this character who embodies both, radical intellect and this dangerous instability. That's a really unique mix for a hero back then. How did these specific men shape Rochester then?
Well, Patrick's non-censorious nature, he wasn't easily shocked, that actually influenced Charlotte's own quite liberal literary education. She read racy Byron and Shelley, apparently. That clearly shaped Rochester's intellectual, passionate side. Branwell's scandalous sexual indiscretions, though, that gave her a real-life model for the Byronic hero.
Yeah.
The dark, brooding, rebellious figure, but maybe with a more destructive edge. It let her infuse Rochester with that dangerous allure.
Right. It's so clear how much of herself and her family went into the book. But what about her own, romantic life? Did that feed into Jane's journey, too?
Oh, absolutely. Charlotte herself had this secret, unreturned passion for her married schoolmaster in Brussels, M. Hager. And our sources really emphasize that his notice and admiration of her intellectual powers was just a huge event in her life, maybe one of the most significant.
Okay, I can definitely see how that experience, even though it wasn't fulfilled, would really inform a novel about longing and separation.
Exactly. Well, that whole Brussels experience became the undisputed template for her later novel, Villette. It also deeply haunts the dynamic of separation and longing in Jane's relationship with Rochester in Jane Eyre. It really shows how those deeply personal feelings, even the painful, unfulfilled ones, can shape a story, give it that raw, authentic feel.
So if some of this is an amalgam or a template, how much of Jane Eyre is really true autobiography? Is Brontë just, changing the details to give herself a happy ending she didn't get in real life?
That's a really sharp question. And Roy Pascal, who studied this autobiographical angle in Bronte's fiction, makes this fascinating claim. He says even the lies or the alterations in Jane Eyre, like giving Jane love fulfillment instead of her own rejection, they weren't just for, wish fulfillment.
Okay, so what was the point of changing things then? These lies, as Pascal calls them.
Pascal argues they actually serve to get nearer to the real truth of her own character, nearer to its hidden capacities as well as, its realized actuality. If you think about it that way, the novel, through imagination, became, quote, truer to her real character than life itself was. It sort of unfolded resources that her actual life seemed determined to choke. It's quite a profound idea, really, that fiction can sometimes access a deeper, more authentic truth about yourself than real life allows.
Wow, that is profound. Fiction being truer than life. Okay. And speaking of development, this fictional autobiography of Jane's actually fits right into a really big literary tradition from the 19th century, the Bildungsroman, the novel of development, right? For anyone unfamiliar, it traces someone's journey, moral, psychological, from childhood to adulthood.
Right. And the critical point here, according to our sources, is that Jane Eyre is seen as the most original and remarkable of its type, because it basically founded the female version of that genre, which was, well, unprecedented. A huge achievement. And this first women's Bildung, naturally, it intersected with every aspect of the woman question back then. It really showed how the social and economic limits, the patriarchy could deeply affect an individual female being, how society's constraints shaped women's inner lives.
And Jane's voice itself is just so radical for the time. There's that famous bit in chapter 12. Women are supposed to be very calm generally, but women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts as much as their brothers do.
Right.
They suffer from too rigid a restraint, too absolute a stagnation, precisely as men would suffer. Is this just like proto-feminism?
Well, our sources suggest the novel's individualism is maybe more literary philosophical than proto-feminist. It seems to value the romantically unique single self, maybe even more so because that self is socially diminished. So what that means is Jane Eyre isn't just about women's rights in a political sense. It's this deep dive into what it means to be an individual, full stop. Especially when society tries to squash you down. It champions that inner spirit.
So it's about a deeper kind of rebellion, more personal.
Exactly. Jane's line, "And nobody knows how many rebellions besides political rebellions ferment in the masses of life which people earth," that connects her internal struggles to the bigger picture, the sort of socio-political unrest of the time. But it emphasizes the personal, especially female inwardness, over just external pressures. Basically, for a woman novelist back then, just telling her own story with that kind of raw personal emotion, that was an act of rebellion in itself, through what one source calls its boldly autobiographical romantic expressionism.
Okay, so Jane Eyre transformed the novel structure, the female voice. But it also did something really new with how childhood was shown in literature, didn't it? Especially by bringing together those two really charged roles, the orphan child and the governess, both sources of tension in 19th century society and fiction. And she puts them in one heroine.
Yeah, and before her, you had the romantic poets Blake, Coleridge, Wordsworth. Influenced by Rousseau, they'd already kind of set up the child as this archetype of romantic sensibility, representing individuality, innocence, imagination, sensitivity.
Right. And then Charles Dickens comes along. Huge achievement, putting the romantic child at the heart of the English novel with Oliver Twist, using kids to expose social problems.
Definitely. But here's where Jane Eyre really pushes things further. Our sources argue it exceeds Dickens's achievement because it expresses the psychic condition of childhood deprivation and persecution. It gets inside the child's head with unprecedented depth. What that means is Brontë didn't just show us what a child suffered, like Oliver Twist's hardships. She took us inside Jane's mind, made us feel the emotional impact of that isolation, that cruelty, in a way nobody really had before. Peter Coveney sums it up powerfully. Jane Eyre is perhaps the first heroine in English fiction to be given, chronologically at least, as a psychic whole.
Oh.
He finishes, "Nothing, in fact, quite like Jane Eyre had ever been attempted before."
Wow.
Nothing quite like Jane Eyre had ever been attempted before. That's a massive claim. Which brings us to another really fascinating thing Brontë did, how she used Gothic conventions. She definitely uses the atmosphere, right, to create mystery and suspense. You see it in classic Gothic bits like the Red Room, the Forbidden Attic, and of course the dangerously sexualized hero, Rochester himself. Yeah, and it's worth remembering these Gothic bits weren't just pulled out of thin air. They were like imaginative echoes from the stories Charlotte made up with her siblings, especially Branwell, when they were kids. They also kind of honor that Byronic irrationalism and imaginative freedom. It's like her way of refusing to conform to the expected, respectably adult female domestic world and the kind of fiction usually associated with it. Breaking free.
Robert B. Heilman actually points out that the novel manages to make Gothic more than a stereotype, finds new ways to get those effects. He calls it Jane Eyre's New Gothic, saying it leads away from stock characters towards new levels of human reality, creating a new kind of passionate engagement.
Okay, so if it's new Gothic, how is it really different from your standard spooky Gothic novel of the time?
Well, this is the really surprising part. Even while she's using and tweaking the Gothic style, she's also kind of parodying it in an anti-Gothic manner,
Mm.
which is funny because it's almost like Jane Austen, who Brontë famously
Mm.
didn't rate very highly. It's pretty bold, isn't it, to kind of undermine the genre you're also leaning on?
It absolutely is. You see it so clearly in that scene where Rochester's bed is on fire. It's high drama, but then it's daringly inflected with comedy when he starts cursing the cold water Jane throws on him, just punctures the tension, brings it right down to this very human, almost funny level.
Yeah. And there's also that extended ironic treatment of social manners with the guests at Thornfield. Blanche Ingram and all that. Those bits definitely go beyond typical Gothic horror. They feel more like social satire. So yeah, she's not just using the Gothic, she's properly playing with it, almost winking at you, the reader.
It really does show her multi-layered genius, doesn't it? Weaving together all these different threads, autobiography, social commentary, messing with genres, and transforming them into something completely fresh and new.
So wrapping this up, what does this all tell us about Jane Eyre? We've seen how Charlotte Brontë just masterfully wove her own life experiences with really innovative fiction. She pioneered the female developmental novel, totally changed how childhood was portrayed, and ingeniously twisted and transformed those Gothic traditions.
Yeah, it's just this powerful testament, really, how one single author, drawing on her deepest personal stuff and her literary influences, could fundamentally reshape the whole literary landscape and tackle some of the biggest social questions of her day while doing it.
So here's something to think about. Considering how Jane Eyre tangled up Charlotte Bronte's own life so deeply with this grand literary and social rebellion, what does that tell you about the enduring power of personal truth? How it can reshape art forms, spark cultural conversations, even centuries later? Something to mull over. Until next time, keep diving deep.